Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about astrology and the Harvey Weinstein conviction. Some of you may have heard Harvey Weinstein is an ex or former renowned, very prolific film producer. I believe he produced that film, Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And the thing about this is how he was convicted on February 24th of 2020. Of course, there were 5 charges against him. He was convicted on 2 of them. He was culpable and found guilty on a first-degree sex assault charge, and then there was another one on third-degree rape. So I'm going to go into his chart and delve into a little bit natal placements and some transits that might have factored in to him ultimately being incarcerated for these salacious actions. Now, the thing about this, first of all, he's a Sun in Pisces, okay, Moon in Capricorn, and Scorpio ascendant. And, when you look at the Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, of course, as I've explained in some other videos, some of you may know, it's a systematic breakdown. It begins with the Sun. The Sun, of course, the basic want can be one of the basic wants for Sun in Pisces can be connected with wanting to fulfill dreams, their fantasies. I think this manifested in him with this strong need, this strong want for filmography, for film production. He has the Sun in Pisces at 29 degrees. Moon in Capricorn, of course, being injected into career, gaining notoriety, status, recognition. This was tied in strongly to his career ambitions. And then you have the Scorpio ascendant, which could be flavored with doing this with a lot of fixated, obsessive, willful energy and very relentless energy, untiring energy. Now, the thing about it is there's some things in this chart that I could see where you see this this energy, with him and how it, may have manifested in terms of, committing, these sexual acts. I mean, he was found guilty, so I do believe he was guilty of these 2 of these 5 charges anyway. May have been guilty of all 5 of them for all we know, but it just wasn't proven in a court of law, of course. Now, one thing, that stands out, he's got Uranus in the 8th house in his chart, and it's part of it. If you consider the ascendant part of a grand water trine configuration, some people just use planets for grand trines. I include the ascendant if it is there. You look at the grand water trine consists of Uranus in the 8th house of sex, then you have the Scorpio ascendant, and then Venus and Pisces in the 4th house. So a lot of times when a grand water trine, can be very auspicious, but I think in some cases it could manifest in being able to use energy very fluidly, even if it's toward negative purposes, unfortunately, without much resistance, as long as one doesn't become complacent and relaxed in that energy. But the thing is, he has Uranus in the 8th house. You have a lot of this. Uranus in the 8th house can be tied into very unorthodox, bizarre sexual tastes, and you're talking about Scorpio rising, which could be very, outwardly very sometimes oversexed and very fixated, obsessive energy. Could give a very Scorpio rising people can often have an exorbitant sexual urge. And then you're talking about the Venus in Pisces in the 4th house. This could be about in some cases, Venus in Pisces, though it's in its exaltation. Venus is in its exaltation in Pisces. It doesn't mean it doesn't have anything adverse connected with it. This could be manifest in some cases. I think it's very unrealistic, fantastical sexual desires. Remember, Venus, Mars is not the only planet connected with sex. Venus is about sex, sensual sex. It's the feminine side of sex, and it may have played a role in this very depraved, kind of salacious behavior of Weinstein, unfortunately. Now, another thing is I want to go back to his his sun in Pisces, it's at a critical degree, and I'm going with the chart on Astro.com. It was a C rating, so just keep in mind this is a little bit speculative, though the planetary placements, well, the aspects are going to be as far as the aspects go with the planets, most of them will still be the same. Planetary placements the same, but they might be off by some degrees, and then the aspects with the moon, some of them may be off a little, given that the moon does move very quickly, and it does, traverse around, 12 degrees a day, somewhere around there. So you understand what I'm saying. But going to his sun in Pisces at 29 degrees, again, it's a critical degree at 29 degrees. It's also unaspected, which could make it more pronounced and put more emphasis on it. Well, on the positive side, the sun at that 29 degrees Pisces can be about that full culmination of energy. And it showed, I think, to me, the way it may have manifested with him is very strong, powerful energy in this film production of wanting and shining in that area. It falls in the 5th house of entertainment. Now, the thing about this, though, is the fact when you have, the sun at 29 degrees, sometimes it could indicate that one could be feeling alone, or being desolate and alone. And the thing about it is, I'm sorry, that's not 29 degrees, that's the unaspected part. I'll get to that momentarily. The sun at 29 degrees can sometimes be about some issues that might need to be reconciled with the father. There may be some, there may be, you're talking about 29 degrees is that this is that full culmination of that Pisces energy. And on a negative side of it, it can also be a lot of focus on deception and duplicity. Now, going back to the fact that this is and also too, you're talking about, it being unaspected. And when I'm talking about unaspected, of course, being unaspected can be very subjective. Unaspected, I'm talking about no major aspects to major astrological placements, and in that I'm talking about the other 9 planets, the midheaven, and the ascendant. And when you have the sun unaspected in astrology, it can suggest that one may be feeling alone, desolate. There might be some identity issues or some identity crisis of the person. You're talking about the sun in Pisces, which I see in theory some astrologers will concur, others may not, but I concur with this theory that the Pisces is the amalgamation of the previous 11 zodiac signs. So his own identity might have been exceptionally unclear and nebulous and very obscure to him. And I'm wondering, and I'm thinking this could have been something where maybe this did he have his own issues in terms of who he was. There may have been some issues. Of course, you're talking about being at this being unaspected. Could there have been some issues in terms with his masculinity, his ego, the masculine side of himself? Or did this play a role in these crimes that were committed? That he was. This is something I think it's very significant in his chart in terms of how this could have manifested in this behavior that he exhibited, unfortunately. Now, on a positive side, when you have the sun unaspected in your chart, there's no adversarial energy. You don't have any resistance to attaining those wants that are associated with the sun and shining in what you want. But at the same time, you don't have, when you don't have the good, the sextiles and trines, there could have been some opportunities that may have been missed. But I think that he had certain placements, other placements that offset this. He has Saturn, I would say, in a large conjunction, wide conjunction to Neptune, which could indicate a career in filmography, in being in Libra, in the arts. So it's really, to me, he had, in having the sun in the 5th house of entertainment, Jupiter falls in the 5th house of entertainment for him as well. So this could be very auspicious and fortuitous for doing something in connection with entertainment. But I'm thinking too, at the same time, maybe the in his natal chart, he has Jupiter making a very tight trine to his Pluto. So I'm thinking, could have this given him some kind of protection for a while and some luck, so to speak, in terms of the sexual domination, which might have been tied into his sexual assault charge that he had on him, at least one of them. So anyway, hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, I'm back. But anyway, now another aspect in his chart, I think, which is really indicative of, maybe this kind of behavior, he has Mars in square aspect to Pluto, a fairly tight square to it. And you're talking about Mars in Scorpio, and that could be very obsessive, fixated energy. And then you have the square to Pluto in Leo. This could be about, putting that energy, sadly, a negative way into that, into sexual domination, perhaps. And I think a lot, that's part of the reason. I mean, he, as far as his chart is, how it was connected with these crimes, unfortunately. Now, the thing about him too is that looking in his chart, I'm seeing some other, some elements, that could have indicated this incarceration. He has the ruler of his 12th house in his 4th house, which could be an indicator in some cases that latter part of life there may be incarceration. That Saturn in long conjunction, I would say, to Neptune, could be an indicator of the dissolving or dissipation of one's career at some point. Neptune is conjunct the 12th house cusp, which could be about, some cases, this could be about a confounding or nebulous or unclear mental illness. It wouldn't surprise me if he does have something going on. It might be tied into sensationalism. I mean, I don't know if he's ever been, as far as officially diagnosed with anything, but it wouldn't surprise me if there is something going on as far as that goes. He has also a conjunction from the moon to his Chiron in his chart. And right there, that could be about dealing with emotional wounds and suffering in matters with one's, reputation, their public image. It's something that, I mean, Moon in Capricorn can be, generally anyway, feeling somewhat, as far as their feelings, feeling melancholy, despondent. Really, it could be about manifesting sad feelings. But then when you have Chiron next to it, this is an indicator that at some point there could be some more emotional suffering in connection with it. The moon is also the ruler of the 9th house in this chart. The 9th house, of course, is connected with the law. At the time when he was when they found him guilty, some interesting transits he had. Transit Venus was very close to his natal Jupiter, so Venus in Aries, so it's not surprising that the law was going to catch up with his volatile, acrimonious sexual behavior at this time. And another thing too, another transit he had, interestingly enough, transit North Node was also, you could say, maybe long conjunction to his natal Uranus and Cancer in the 8th house of sex. So when you're talking about the North Node in transit, it can be connected with issues that one may have to confront. And at this time, sadly for him, he may have had to confront some kind of, bizarre, unorthodox sexual behavior, being in Cancer, that he felt very close to home with. Perhaps. So those are some things that I noticed when this, as far as transits go, when this went down. And he also had a number of transits from Capricorn in the 3rd house of rational thinking and communication. And it tells me that maybe he had, this was a lot of, I mean, you talk about transit Jupiter in the 3rd house, and Jupiter, as I've explained in other videos, can be rather paradoxical, could be very strongly benign and benevolent, but it could also have a tendency to enlarge and expand. In some cases, it may have enlarged and expand limitations and restrictions in his communications. I don't know fully what went down at the trial, but I feel fairly safe that he probably didn't say too much at the trial, that he was very restricted, so to speak, in his communications. And This is also a lot of despondent, depressing energy in the rational mind, very pessimistic thinking, I believe, was going on with him at the time. I believe he felt, in all likelihood, he was going to be convicted of these salacious charges. The fact in his natal chart that he has Jupiter making the opposition to that Neptune. It tells me, Neptune can be about sensationalism. You have the aspect in your natal chart, Jupiter in opposition to it, fairly tight opposition he had. It indicates to me that at some point that the law was going to be very opposed and adversarial to this, that he would ultimately get caught. He also has a cardinal grand cross configuration in his chart, which consists of Uranus in Cancer in the 8th house, Saturn in Libra in the 11th. He's got the moon in Capricorn in the 2nd, and also you're talking about Mercury in Aries in the 5th house. So there was just and when you're talking about grand crosses in astrology, they're often referred to as crosses to bear. They can be connected with a lot of tribulation, adversity, and suffering. And this could have been something that he had to deal with, that he had a hard time disconnecting from, including the unorthodox, bizarro sexual behavior indicated by Uranus in the 8th house. And also, you're talking about as well, at the same time, you're talking about the really that being one of the main parts of it. Moon also being in Capricorn in the 2nd, having that emotional need to maintain one's reputation, one's public image, a certain stature in life, their career ambitions, and those kind of things. Those were some things that he had to deal with, and I think he really. And the fact that the moon in Capricorn is making the opposition to the Uranus in Cancer tells me that he might have been going through a perpetual tug of war and trying to, as far as the moon in Capricorn, having that emotional need, or keeping that, or moon can be connected with what we want to be recognized as the public, as far as the public goes, and of being successful, of attaining ambitions, to being somebody that was that had a certain good stature in life. And you have that opposing the Uranus in Cancer. Well, in the 8th house of sex, that there was going to be difficulty doing that because of this quirky sexual behavior that he did exhibit. So those are some things. When I look at this, that played out in really in his sadly, this really this terrible salacious, really horrendous behavior that he exhibited on a sexual level. So I don't have too much more to say about this. Another thing, though, I thought was interesting when this verdict came in. Transit Sun was right by his Venus in Pisces, and also natal Mercury in Pisces retrograde was not far from his Venus. So it's really something where it's not surprising that communication came down at that time, where he was going to have to pay for something. Remember, Venus is about money. I'm saying figuratively, he had to pay at this time for something that was very salacious, very depraved, and also being Pisces, very confounding and mind-boggling. So I think this is how this may have panned out. And with the sun being involved, it shined the light on these issues, and he was going to be put in the spotlight for this kind of befuddling and perplexing Pisces-like behavior at this time. And also remember, this sun is very dominant, and it's very powerful, and it was involved hitting his Venus in Venus at Pisces 4 degrees. And remember that that 4 degrees is a critical degree in astrology. It's interesting. Another note I wanted to touch up on is that my natal sun in Cancer at 9 degrees is very close proximity to his Uranus in Cancer at 9 degrees, so it's in his 8th house. So it's not surprising that I'm shining the light on this bizarre, unorthodox sexual behavior on his part. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.